Okay, welcome everyone. We are continuing with our series on light. This, I believe, is our fourth class in the series. And there'll be one more next week, and then we will move on to a new subject in our series, Kabbalah, Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. So this is our fourth class on light. And tonight we're going to do manifestations of light. And the three that we'll do tonight is light and intellect, light and healing, and light and speech. So all of these are really part of our daily lives. A lot of our discussions have been very spiritual and deep, profound concepts. And tonight we're going to try to kind of bring it down more to our intellectual and emotional worlds of thought, speech, and action. So we've talked a lot about light. And the question is, on a very simple level, well, when we talk about the light of God, how do I access that? What does that mean to me? What's my experience with the light of God? Here we're not talking about physical light. We're talking about this concept, as we use it all the time, the light of God, spiritual light. So what does that mean exactly? So we're going to start with a simple idea, but it's actually quite profound, because according to science, biology, the human brain is just about the most complicated thing out there. The more research they do, the more they are amazed what this little brain in our head is able to do. I mean, just like, we hold our device in our hand, and we're now also totally amazed at what this thing can do. 40 years ago, quite literally, or 50 years ago, a computer would take up the space of an entire floor of a building. The first prototypes of computers. Now, in the palm of our hand, it's no longer a smartphone. It's a computer that can do an amazing amount of things. All the more so the brain. So we have this term, being enlightened. The light bulb goes off in our head. Everyone remember maybe they still have it. It used to be in a comic book or a cartoon, if they want to show someone having an idea, they would show a light bulb kind of hovering over the head. That was the idea. Or I see the light. I now see the light. So when we look at the brain in a sense is an electric transformer. Because what's happening in the running of the brain, it's all working on neurons and synapses. Billions of them, billions and billions and billions of synapses. And all the information is like jumping between neurons through synapses, but they're electrically charged. And so when we have this kind of term, I see the light, or I want to enlighten you, or I have been enlightened, it's actually quite literal. It's actually quite literal that the intellect in the way that the brain works is light, is electricity, is fire. So this is just a simple idea, but it's really quite amazing that this is what we're talking about. So a little bit deeper, and we've talked about this a little bit already, is that there was a time when we talked about atoms and the particles in atoms as being things, entities. And now they're being talked about as wave functions, as almost impossible without take away the observer to know where anything is, because everything's in a wave function. It could be here, it could be there, it could be anywhere, it could be everywhere. Until an observer, in a sense, forces particles to take a position. But science has now gone one step beyond this and is, what is a wave function? And now what science is talking about is, in a sense, all of material reality, which we've already quoted the Zohar a number of times, that all matter is thickened light. In other words, everything is the light of God. And this light of God, as it moves through the worlds, from the higher worlds to the lower worlds, and the worlds become more material, then the light, which is behind the energy, and the energy becomes the matter, it becomes thickened light. But if we go one step before, so what is the light of God? What's behind the light of God? So in science, what they're now talking about beyond wave functions is that everything is encoded information. Everything is a manifestation of information. Now, the way we relate to it from a Torah perspective is with a verse that we say every morning. Kulam b'chachma asita. You made everything with wisdom. And the wisdom is what we're going to relate to the intellect. So everything is information. The closest that we have to really understand this is the DNA, because that is what the DNA is. Excuse me, it's the code of whatever the entity that the DNA is enclosed in. That's what makes up what the entity is. In every cell of our body, we have our full DNA code. And so science is now looking at not just the DNA code, but is seeing that all of creation is, when we go like one step behind, is encoded information. And in our terms, it's God's wisdom is encoded in all of creation. And that translates into light, which translates into energy, which translates into form, and then translates into matter. So when we're talking about the light of God, it is everything. Everything is a manifestation of the light of God. And this light is a manifestation of God's wisdom. That is, in a sense, if we're trying to understand light and intellect. So when it gets down to us as human beings, if we want to connect to the light of God, we do it through connecting to the wisdom of God. And for us, the wisdom of God is encoded in the Torah. The Torah becomes it's not only the blueprint of creation, that's what it says in the Zohar, that God looked into the Torah and created the world. But when we as individuals want to connect to the light of God, the energy of God, the wisdom of God, so we do it really through, I'm going to mention three things, but they are expanded. We do it through learning Torah, through fulfilling mitzvot, through prayer, and I'll add meditation. And meditation has many, many forms. There's meditating through music, meditating through dance, meditating through contemplation, meditation through being in nature, meditation through verses in the Torah, the letters, the sefirot, the names of God. But we're connected, in other words, to be connected to the light of God is to be connected to the Torah and everything that comes from the Torah. Like I said, prayer and meditation and mitzvot. So last week we mentioned that the plural of the word light or wrote equals 613. And we discussed this last week, but it fits in here also, that every mitzvah becomes one of the channels to experience or to draw down God's light into the world and into ourselves. So 613, of course, is the number of mitzvot in the Torah. So here we have mitzvot, we have Torah, we have light. The Torah is called light. Ner mitzvah, the Torah or. A mitzvah is like a candle, and the Torah is like an all-encompassing light. Okay, so give me a minute. I'm trying to put this together here. So I'm just thinking, because we mentioned being in nature and the type of meditative, contemplative state one can get in nature. And there's an expression that we use that when we see something incredible in nature, we say it's the gedulat habore, the greatness of the Creator. That is what we are seeing. So we discuss this a little bit almost every week, is the relationship between infinite light and finite light. And that is one of the most special things about finite light, is in a sense, it is the bridge between infinite and finite, between oneness and plurality, between energy and matter. Because light is, it's an entity, it's a physical, it manifests itself in matter. And yet we have the very, very paradoxical idea that a photon has no weight, has no matter to it. And that's why in Einstein's formulas of especially E equals mc squared, light plays such an important part between in a sense, the wisdom of the Creator and how that wisdom is is channeled and translated and is manifest in the physical world. And so this whole idea of light is, in a sense, our connection with the Creator, is seeing the light, or having an innovative idea where the light bulb goes out. These are jump, like with the synapses in the brain. It's, in a sense, it's revelations of light that is happening on a physical level, absolutely on a physical level, but also on the spiritual level, is we're getting bursts of energy, bursts of light. And that is our deep connection with the Creator of the world. Okay. Of course, there's much more that we could say, but now we're going to go on to light and healing. Now, this is a very, 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 very interesting thing, because in modern medicine, so light, or electromagnetic energy, plays an absolute fundamental part of modern healing. And without even understanding exactly how it works, but just X-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, all of these are, in a sense, based on light. Laser, using laser, all of these things are taking different frequencies of light on the electromagnetic spectrum, where actually light is actually a relatively small part of the spectrum. And so medicine is using more and more of the fullness of the spectrum of electromagnetic energy for healing. And I mean, we could see it, because 50 years ago, 70 years old was old. A person was like old. Nowadays, just so many people are living into their 80s, 90s, 100s. And so many people are being healed through the energy of light in what could be, of course, we have radiation, treating cancer. I mean, there's just so many things that are happening. And, you know, we talk about Israel being a light unto the nations. So it's not just spiritually. I mean, Halavaya would be more spiritually, but on the physical level of water management and drip irrigation and reusing brackish water and solar power and all of the, so many of the computer media communication innovations have been coming out of Israel, but especially in the medical field. In the medical field, Israel is close to the top of constant. Almost every week, you can read in Jerusalem Post, Arutz Sheva, a new breakthrough in medical research. Quite amazing. And so the connection of light with healing it's so relevant to us today. But let's look into the Torah and some of the words. Refuah If you take the letters of refuah and you permute them, it's or peh, the light of the mouth. So here, already in the word refuah, we have the word light. Now this can have many, many meanings, but on the simplest level, this is something we've all experienced. For the good and for the negative is what we'll call a doctor's or a nurse's bedside manner. In other words, someone goes to a doctor and they're short with them. They show no sympathy, no empathy. It's very difficult to trust that doctor, to even listen to the doctor. But what a difference when you have a doctor who explains things and is patient and listens and helps the patient understand, gives them hope. It's all the difference in the world. So this is one of the ideas of or peh. We'll call it bedside manner, but the way that a healer, a doctor, a nurse will talk to a patient has an enormous effect on a person's ability to heal. In the sphirot, so the middle sphera between above and below and between right and left is Tiferet. It's right in the middle between the intellect and the emotions, between everything that the right side is associated with and everything that the left side is associated with. And Tiferet, it means beauty, but it also means a holistic type of beauty, a type of beauty that harmonizes above and below and right and left. And in the word Tiferet, the root is Pei Resh Aleph, and that are the same letters of Rofeh, to heal. So this tells us something very important, is that healing is dependent on an integrated, holistic perspective of all the different factors that go into good health. Now, until maybe, I'm just picking a number here, 30, 40 years ago, the idea of alternative medicine was totally ignored by normative, typical medical establishment. Things have changed radically, absolutely radically, where it's now alternative medicine is accepted in most health packages. And but what's more important is the philosophy behind it, because again, until 40, 50 years ago, a person's mental state or emotional state or lifestyle was considered, in a sense, immaterial to one's health. But that has, again, changed radically, where people understand that a person's emotional state and their perspective on life, their attitude about life, whether it's optimistic or pessimistic, can make all the difference in healing. I have to see, I just see Amy there. For those who remember, Amy told us this beautiful story about, very personal, about her own healing and how having a positive attitude, it quite literally for most people makes all the difference in the world. So this, I'm just connecting to the Sphirot, because Tiferet, which is right in the middle, is teaching us what the Rambam calls the golden mean. Now, Rambam in his day was considered one of the greatest doctors in the world. And even to today, much of what he said is absolutely still applicable and sound advice. On the as far as midot, or characteristics, or personality, so the Rambam always encouraged people to be what's on the golden mean. But also in health, almost all of his health advice, and there's actually a number of books you can get in Jewish bookstores that just go through the Rambam's books on healing and the advice, and all of it is based on not too hot, not too cold, not too much, not too little. As far as eating goes, as far as heating, sleep, whatever it is, everything was not too much and not too little. Everything like Tiferet, right down the middle. So we have already, when we said in refuah, so we have the words or peh, and in another expression, we're going to see light and healing again. And that's in the 28 times from Ecclesiastes, from Kohelet, the third chapter of Kohelet, there's a time for this and a time for that. To everything, there is a season. And there are 14 pairs, there are 28 times altogether, but they come in pairs. And one of them is there's a time to kill and a time to heal. And the expression in Hebrew to heal is the 8 lirpo, a time to heal. So if you take that phrase in Hebrew, again, if you want to look it up, it's in the third chapter of Ecclesiastes. It's the 8 lirpo. If you, and this is from Rav Ginsburg, if you permute the letters, it's pu'ulat or. It's an action of light. It's an action of light. So again, this is the second idea of healing that we have, where the word or is engraved in it. Now we'll have a third one. Wait 1 second. This is very, very connected, but actually I'm going to save this for light and speech. Okay. Now in Yedid Nefesh, we say Yedid Nefesh every Friday night before we daven Kabbalah Shabbat. And most people say it again at third meal on Shabbat. And one of the expressions is Nafshi Cholat Ahava. My soul is lovesick. My soul is lovesick. So what can heal being sick with? Here we're talking about a person is expressing their soul is lovesick to be close to God. And so the way to heal being lovesick is by connecting to the light of God. That is how that's how we heal ourselves. We heal ourselves through being connected to Torah, to mitzvot. And of course, if we're connected to Torah and mitzvot, so almost automatically we're connected to having a purpose in life. Without purpose, this is what leads to disease. This is what leads to disease. When a person has no purpose, then it's very, very easy to get into all kinds of addictions. Look for anything to mask the pain. And so being connected to the light of God means being connected to positivity, to purpose. And this has the greatest healing power of really anything. Really anything. If someone, I think we discussed this last week, if you have two people who receive the same diagnosis, a very, very life-threatening diagnosis, and one almost immediately gives up and just throws up their hand and just feels bitter and abandoned and just unable to deal with the situation, in most cases, they will go downhill very, very quickly. On the other hand, if someone is positive and has a good attitude and has hope and has faith, so in many cases, it's not automatic and there's no guarantees, but in a lot of cases, they will not only be able to deal with it much better, but there's even statistically, they will live longer. They will live longer. So this is a very, very, very important idea here. Okay, and now we want to connect light to speech. Now, we already said that refuah are the letters of the light of the mouth, or peh. So another teaching from Rav Ginsburg on this subject is the first mention of light, of course, is in the third verse of the Torah, in the first day of creation. Vayomer Elokim yihi or, vayihi or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So the expression yehi or the whole verse, Vayomer Elokim yehi or, vayehi or. In that verse, there's only 7 different letters are used. Now, as many of the letters are repeated. And those 7 letters, again, this is a teaching from Rav Ginsburg, spell out or milah. And there's 2 ways we can interpret these. The light of the covenant, milah is circumcision, but milah also means a word. And this is the first time that God, one of the 10 expressions of creation, Vayomer Elokim yehi or, vayehi or. So what came from that speech was light. And so throughout the prophets, there are many, many verses that equate light and speech. And we already mentioned the importance of what we call the doctor's bedside manners, that the way a healer treats the patient has a huge effect on how the healing is going to go. So here we see that light is connected to both covenant, because milah is the covenant of circumcision, and it also means a word. So this is connected to what we said about purpose, because when we believe that we have a covenant with God, So it's not a casual relationship. It's an unbreakable relationship. So if a person feels that no matter what happens, the good, the bad, the ups and the downs, sickness and healing, so if one feels that it's all in the context of my unbreakable covenantal relationship with God, that gives us tremendous strength to heal and want to be healthy. Now, I should mention that being healthy is one of the mitzvahs in the Torah. It says in the Torah that a person has to guard their soul. Now, this obviously can mean spiritually, but it uses the word nefesh, and so it's taken to mean that a person should be very careful with their health. And so, just like there's a lot of talk about the environment, so as far as I'm concerned, being concerned about the environment in the world is a Torah imperative. It's not like a modern movement that started 50 years ago. If one goes back into the Torah, it's a very different subject. Now we go back in the Torah, the Mishnah Torah of Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, the Midrash. There's scores and scores and scores of statements and laws about protecting the environment. But it's the same thing with health. It's not a side issue. Truthfully, to be a frum yid means to take one's health seriously and not to compromise their health by all kinds of different lifestyles that we lead, or addictions, or food that we eat. As much as possible, we're human beings. We have our desires and passions, but as much as possible, we're supposed to really, really guard our souls and our bodies. But going back to speech, so here, God's first speech is this idea of the light of the covenant, but the second one is milah, means a word. The light of the word. And so there's a phrase that says, Petach devarecha ya'ir, that the opening of your mouth, we're speaking to God here, brings light. And so, again, light and speech are connected all the time. And so the Baal Shem Tov, in his analysis of the word chashmal. So chashmal, chash, and for those who have been coming to the whole series, we delved very deeply into chashmal, into this energy that Ezekiel, the prophet, saw in his vision. Chash means silent, and mal means speech. And so the Baal Shem Tov, one of his main teachings is what's called hachna'ah, havdalah, and hamtakah, submission, separation, and sweetening. And so he explained, he took the word chashmal, and because mal can mean two things. Mal means milah, circumcision, but it also means a word, speech. So he said, chash mal mal. Chash, silence, is submission. Mal, what is circumcision? We cut off the foreskin. That's what's called separation. submission, separation, and sweetening. He explained that all process goes according to those steps. So he said that chash, silence, is submission. Mila, meaning circumcision, is separation. And the second mal, chash, mal, means speech, but it's sweetening. So here again, we've been discussing this all night, the importance of speech in the healing process. But of course, speech is a manifestation of thought. And so again, if we have a positive attitude about things, then it helps enormously with being a healthy person. Now, since we're talking about light here and the connection with speech and the ability for speech to enlighten. So in the first day of creation, the word light is mentioned 5 times. The most common explanation for that is that these 5 mentions of light is a hint, a remez, to the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, the Torah. A second explanation is it's a hint to the 5 levels of the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. But we can add another idea here, and that is that speech comes out of 5 places in the mouth. Just physiologically. And we've talked about this before, from the tongue, from the palate, from the teeth, from the lips, and from the throat. And so when we say petach devarecha ya'ir, so we see how speech can enlighten. And I think everyone knows that if you're in the presence of a depressed person, it doesn't feel so light, put it that way. But when one is in the presence of someone who is positive, who is upbeat, and whose words are inspiring and optimistic, this brings light. It just, like in learning Torah, if the words that are emanating from the teacher are inspiring, then they put us in contact with God's light, because the Torah is God's light. So this is a very deep connection between speech and light. Okay, so we'll end. And as usual, there's always much more to speak about. And that's the idea of Mashiach. It's brought down that if you change the shin to a sin, so Mashiach becomes Masiach, which is a speaker, someone who converses. So we're told, how is the Mashiach going to conquer the world? So according to our tradition, there is certainly possibility of very traumatic times before the coming of Mashiach. All of the prophets wrote it as a possibility, not as a deterministic assurity. Many people attribute the wars and the travails of the last 100 years to the footsteps of the Mashiach. And some people will already interpret the wars that have happened as the wars between Gog and Magog that are predicted in the teachings of Ezekiel and others. But even if there are wars, still Mashiach is going to ultimately conquer the world through the power of speech. That is how it will happen. The Mashiach is not going to bludgeon people into believing in one God. Other religions have tried that, and some are still trying. But that's not our vision of world peace, of the oneness of God. So Mashiach is a Messiah, and he will spread the light of God through his speech, through his teaching. So this is connected. Again, we spoke about this, but I'll say it again, to what's happening in modern technology, where many people, including the Lubavitcher Rebbe, said very, very clearly that the advances in technology are all part of the coming of the Messianic era. It's not like a coincidence. It's not a side issue. With all of the dangers and all of the negative parts of modern technology, which are many, but like everything in life, it depends how you use it. Most things in this world are neutral. Depends how you use it. But the positive aspects of communication is that they are bringing the world together. They're allowing us to be learning together tonight. They have the possibility of bringing all the nations of the world together in unity and harmony. And it seems clear that for any figure to have the type of influence that the Mashiach will have, it will have to be through the wonders of technology and communication, that such a figure will be able to address the entire world and teach the whole world. That's where it's leading to. We just have to hope we don't destroy the planet in the meantime. Okay, we should all have a bracha to see a figure like we're talking about to come and to literally enlighten the world. And we're told in Isaiah, we all know this verse, that when God reveals more and more of himself, that the knowledge of God will cover the earth like the waters cover the sea. May we really merit to see that.